Okay, cool. I think we can get started. Welcome to the PM GIM. I assume you're all here for this, so you're in the right place. I'm Luke. I am the president of next year's board. So if you're a PM next year, I'll be the president of the board. In addition to myself, we have Jackson and Vicky, who are current PMs, and also the Adam, you're soon. Adam's next. Jackson and Vicky are current PMs, and also the heads of PM for next year. So if you're a PM next year, Jackson and Vicky will be your heads of project management. Adam is also a fantastic PM who we have this year. So this is me, 3 current PMs and 2 upcoming head of PM. So that's who we have here. That's all of us. I don't think we need to specific intros. I think that's good. So let's just go with that. So yeah, this is the PM GIM. So we're hoping that all of you are at least at some level interested in being a project manager for JumboCode next year. And we are super excited about that. Super excited to read your applications, have you, etc. Okay, so this is the basic outline of what we're going to cover. We're going to talk about what a PM is, what the role involves. All 3 of the PMs we have here are going to describe kind of what they do in their PM role, because it's a little bit flexible as to like individual PMs approach the role a little bit differently and do a slightly different set of things. We're going to do a myth versus reality section about like, common fears that people have about becoming PMs. And then we're going to have a bunch of time for an open Q&A at the end. Cool. What is JumboCode? I assume many of you, if not all of you, know what JumboCode is. My quick rundown is that JumboCode is a tough student organization that exists to do social good and give students experience working on projects. So half the point is that students get experience working on web development projects or mobile development projects, something to add to their resumes, experience working in a real team with real technologies like React, etc., that you would use in a real job to develop a real product. And the second half of it is that we do all of this work pro bono for nonprofits, which is, community service and social good. And we help local nonprofits have access to technologies and a class of development that they otherwise wouldn't have access to. That's what JumboCode is, tough student organization. I assume many of you are already involved in JumboCode at some level or looking to be, and that's great. So in JumboCode, JumboCode is split into a bunch of different teams. Welcome, Daria. Welcome, Daria. So JumboCode is split into a bunch of different teams. Each team has a project manager and a tech lead who kind of form together the leadership team for that team. So the project manager is kind of the head of the team, leads the team, organizes members together, and we're going to go more in depth into this. Cool. So you guys can't see the slides at all because they're not on the back screen, but you can look behind you. Oh, Adam has them up. Perfect.
Yeah, so what are the PM responsibilities? So it starts a bit over the summer. The heads of client management will pick out a project for you, basically. You'll sort of interact with them a bit to talk about your interests, and then they'll find your project. And the heads of client management start to develop a project spec, which sort of goes over like what has to get done in the project, what the different nonprofit is looking for. And then you're going to meet with the nonprofit and sort of build that out a bit more. And just develop that project spec. And then after that, you sort of are going to pick a tech lead and also pick your members of your team. And you're going to plan a timeline throughout the course of the year. And it's going to start probably more specific and then get a little more vague because it's hard to plan for like 8 months. And then also throughout the year, you're going to sort of keep checking in with your client, demoing, trying to develop sort of in a back and forth way where you show something, get feedback on it, and try to just develop it that way. So you'll meet with your client maybe once a month, kind of depends on the project. But yeah.
Cool. Okay.
Well, and in addition to those more project-based roles, you also you're also project manager, so you're also kind of like the leader of the team. So yeah, in addition to the project and client aspect of things, you'll also be in charge of the team. And that can be divided into 3 components. The first one will be like, you'll be in charge of selecting your team. So it's like the technical leader of your group and also the other developers and designers, which happens in the beginning. And you'll also be checking in, issuing tasks for every sprint and also checking in with your members quite frequently. I would say for issuing tasks, it happens usually once every 2 weeks. You'll work with the tech lead to figure out what you need to get done in the next month or like the next 2 weeks. And you'll also be checking students like personally to see like if they're growing, if I don't know, if they find the task too hard, too light, whatever, just to make them happy. Yeah, so please them and also you plan to facilitate bonding activities within your group. So like in JumboCode, people don't just code, but also like make friends and do fun stuff together. So me and my team, for example, this semester, it was this semester, right? We went roller skating. Yeah, it was really fun. So we also do those fun things, and that's your job as a PM.
Awesome. Thank you, Vicky.
So we just talked to you about being a PM. Unfortunately, being a PM is not everything. We are not good at everything. And so here are some things you really don't need to be that good at to be a PM. Some of these are nice to have, but none of these things are something that you critically need to excel at this role. So you don't need to be some master of web. Luke Taylor over here, for example, has pretty much invented the web since he was 15, and that's phenomenal. You do not need to be that. You can totally just have some experience coding. What? You can totally just have some experience under your belt with programming, as long as you have like a strong leadership style and good leadership capabilities. That is the main important thing. You don't need prior experience directly in some type of management role, be that project management or management in general. Again, we're looking for the aptitude of being able to lead. You don't necessarily need to have a resume that perfectly matches being a project manager. And you definitely do not need to have already been in JumboCode. So being in JumboCode might be nice because you might be able to have some experience here and touch on why you love this club, but you totally don't need that to be a good project manager. And in fact, I'd say one of our strongest project managers this year, by far and away, is someone who never did JumboCode before, and he is absolutely killing it.
Yeah, awesome. And then I'm going to talk a little bit because I represent board here more than they do, as how board supports PMs. So this might sound like, planning out the timeline, checking in with the client. This might sound like a ton of responsibility, a super big role that's really intimidating. In reality, PMs have the full support of JumboCode board throughout the entire year. Essentially, the main role of JumboCode board, besides like deciding things and facilitating club level things, is to support the PMs. So board throughout the year runs check-ins with PMs on basically once every 2 week schedule to like absolutely check in. And of course, PMs have access to everybody on board in between that interval as well, whenever anything comes up, whether that's an issue with a team member from the project management side, whether that's a technical issue from like the debugging side, or anything else, you need money for a bonding, or you need whatever you need from board. Board exists to support project managers. We do a lot of supporting project managers. So you kind of have that safety net and cushion throughout the entire year of everybody on board working really hard to make sure that you're supported and successful in your role as a PM. Yeah. So next we're going to go into hearing. So, there are some things that are tenets of the project manager role that all PMs do, but also a lot of PMs kind of take it in their own direction. Some PMs do more technical things, some PMs do less technical things, some PMs plan more bonding, some PMs plan less. There's a whole spectrum of the ways in which PMs decide to run their team and get involved. And so we're going to hear from each of these lovely PMs we have here about what their experience is. Starting with Jackson.
Hi, everyone. Once again, I'm Jackson. So a bit more of a personal intro. I'm a junior. I use the He series, and I'm currently the project manager for Team Tuppet. So I will start off by saying I love my team. So a week in my life as a PM is just it's super easy because my team is so wonderful and so willing to put the work in that they're great. But what does my week look like? So we have our weekly team meetings on Monday. So not only are you expected in the club to show up to Hack Night, usually on Sundays, you also generally will be running a hour-long or so team meeting separate from Hack Night. So we have ours Monday night. So my week gets to kick off with that, which is a great way to kick it off. During that, it usually is kind of sussing out what tasks need to be assigned, as well as kind of before that, I'll have a talk with my tech lead. We'll figure out what we really need to be getting done this week and next week. So usually we work in sprints, and then we'll assign that in there. Then it's supposed to be a working session, but I will admit it usually just turns into all of us just kind of hanging out and having a really good time together. But then over the week, the developers will be working. I'll be trying to contact the client. So currently the client that I have is named Hillary Binda. She is phenomenal. She works pretty closely with us and gives us really good feedback. So my role is kind of coming up with the tasks as well as communicating with the client what we've been doing, what the path that we're on currently, and getting feedback so that we can iterate and not give her something that she doesn't want. So another part of it is, of course, trying to make developers comfortable. So I haven't done as good of a job this semester as checking in as I would like, but you can check in with developers whenever you have the opportunity. And then we've had, I think, 2 bondings this semester, although one of them, I will admit, did not work well. One of them worked actually extremely poorly, not because it wasn't fun or because we didn't do things, because we all went like 20 minutes off of campus for something that I thought we didn't need a reservation for. So we needed a reservation very badly. But yeah, that's roughly a week in my life. And I'd say a small thing, I think in that I didn't feel a need to mention any conflicting timetables with classes. I think this is a very manageable role to take in addition to other classes. For context, I also I'm pretty heavily involved in 2 other clubs, and I work 3 jobs as well. So this is definitely a role that you're able to take on with a lot of other things and make it work.
Carson, how many hours a week would you say you spend as a JumboCode PM, like just on JumboCode?
Oh, so I think in the application, you're supposed to say that you're able to commit around 10 hours a week. I would say that it is never close to that for me. And I don't know if I'm unique in that matter. I'm a pretty hands-off PM in terms of actually doing the coding. So I think for me, I'm probably putting 3 to 4 hours a week in on an average week. So not too horrible. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Carson. Vicky.
Yeah, and this is my team from this semester. Not this year. And since Jackson just talked about his time commitment, which is like 3 to 4 hours, I think it's usually like because hack nights and hack session is already 3 hours. So it's probably like 1.5 hours beyond that. So I would say like 4.5, 4.5 hours seems like a pretty like accurate estimate for me, at least. And yeah, I guess in addition to what Jackson just said, there's the sprint planning, and the sprint basically just means every team basically we try to work on little things every 2 weeks. So it's just not, oh, you work on this whole thing for the entire semester, but you kind of get new tasks every 2 weeks. That's how a sprint works. But anyways, so yeah, as a PM, I would like communicate with my tech lead and try to figure out what to assign to each members every 2 weeks and make sure that everyone is on track. But a lot of the technical things would fall on my tech lead because I'm not a very technical PM. So a lot of the code review, planning the architecture of the web app falls on my tech lead, who is wonderful. And yeah, and in addition to that aspect of things, for a client, like what Jackson said, I usually meet with them every month. I think that's the frequency for most PMs. So you would call them every month to update them on your like progress and what you need from them, any feedback, things like that. And yeah, and also there's the fun things like team bondings and check-ins. I would say those usually happen once every 2 months, every 1.5 months. But yeah, those usually don't take much time, but it's just a day of fun. But yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, hey, what's up, everyone? I'm Adam. I use the Q series, and I guess I'll start with time as well. I think slightly more now than I did last semester because I've been a bit more hands-on coding. But probably about 5 hours right now, 4 to 5 hours, so pretty similar, not a crazy amount. In the structure that my team uses, we have hack nights, and then we do 2 optional sessions that you can go to, called like office hours, where you can just come and basically do work and work with, if you're working with somebody specifically on a task, which I do pretty often, so like 2 people will work on something, you can work with them. And then also I'll be there to sort of answer any questions or help. I've taken on somewhat of a more technical role because I lost a tech lead at the start of the semester, so I kind of have to do a bit of both. But everyone on my team is really great, so everyone is sort of a tech lead in their own way. You can go to anyone for help. Yeah, so we have those office hours, and then I go to those. And then my other role, I guess I sort of interact with the client, which happens maybe once a month. And my client, the person I've contacted, has changed like 3 times, which has not been very fun because the project spec changes like very slightly each time because the person changes. But so I'll talk with them once a month, and then I'll sort of just spend the rest of that 5 hours about building out sort of the tasks that people are going to be doing and working on sort of assigning them and putting together resources that help people with those tasks, like links, because I think most of the time people can figure out how to do something if they know what to look up. So I sort of just help them find how to look up things. It's basically my main goal. Yeah, and then just answer questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Adam. Okay. This is like our fun myth versus reality section where we're going to debunk some common misconceptions that people have about the PM role. So after we've gotten through these, none of you are going to have any doubts anymore. Myth.
Yeah, so myth, being a PM is basically a full-time job. We've kind of already talked about this a bit, but it's really not a crazy amount of work, and it's pretty flexible week to week. I would be surprised if any PM did more than like 7 hours a week, maybe. I think probably everyone does around our time is my guess, right? Maybe less.
From everyone I've talked to,
Yeah.
ranges from probably like 3 to 6 on the project.
Yeah, so like basically as much as being a developer, if not less on some weeks. It's really not a crazy amount of work, and it's very manageable to do. I think all of us probably have a lot of different commitments that we have, but it's super flexible where you can fit things in.
Cool.
Another common myth, which is one that I believed when I before I applied, is that PMs need the technical skills to develop the project from start to finish. Yeah, so I remember we talked about how you don't have to be involved in JumboCode in order to apply as a PM, and that's the case with me. So I wasn't a developer or designer with JumboCode before I was a PM, and I was really scared that because I didn't really have. I mean, I took Pump 20, but that's pretty much it. Yeah. So I was a little worried about that, but the thing is, as a PM, you have the support of the board and also your tech lead, who kind of takes care of more of the technical side of things. So even if maybe like web development, knowing the architecture of the tools, isn't your strong suite, you don't really have to worry that much about it, just because. Every PM kind of takes on a different role, and it's totally okay if yours is more towards the team leadership side of things.
Cool.
So this is a total thing, because you don't just interact with your team. Not only do you have the opportunity to talk to board whenever you want it all, but again, we have these weekly hack nights. And at these weekly hack nights, you're able to see all of the other teams. Traditionally, it's usually a session where you get to work with your team, but recently we've been trying to make a lot more of like inter-team dynamics be emphasized here. So the first 15-20 minutes will be just getting up, meeting new people, and hanging out with all of them. So this is a great opportunity to not only learn from other PMs about what's happening, and for the developers to learn from each other as well, but also just a great opportunity to make friends, like outside of this is a great club in that I think it attracts a really wonderful group of people who are all really passionate about not only developing code, but nonprofits and helping the world with those skills. So these are a lot of really cool people you get to meet. And especially as a PM, I'll say within the PMs, I think we all have a relatively tight connection, and we've done PM bondings in the past.
PM
where-
only.
PM only bondings, yes. And yeah, we definitely had a lot of opportunities to get closer like this. So definitely not just you're just with your team.
So let's add it, and also, there are times where like we did inter-team bondings, so me and Adam, we did like roller skate / meeting in Assembly Row crossing bonding, so that was really fun. And yeah, that's another example of how you don't just get stuck within your 10.
Nice. I think Jackson already kind of talked about the last one too. Okay, so now what we have is open Q&A. So we want to hear your questions. What questions do you have about the PM role? Questions for me as someone on board, questions for them as current PMs. Anything you want to ask, we want to hear. Yeah.
It sounds like so much work and great work, but how do I prepare for this? How do I does anything happen over the summer?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, actually not, so actually, before you even get started in your actual role as a PM, where you have to lead your team, you're gonna have a ton of time and space over the summer, not like an arduous amount of work. You're gonna have a good amount of time and space over the summer to work with board, at which point, like over the course of the summer, you're gonna find out what your team is. We're gonna match you with a client that hopefully aligns with your interests. You'll get a chance in your PM application to say what kinds of things you're interested in working on. You don't have specific preferences, that's also fine. Because maybe not everybody has specific preferences about what kind of nonprofit they'd like to work with, but we're gonna do our best to match you with a client that you think is doing really cool and compelling work. And then also over the summer, you're gonna select your tech lead. And then you and your tech lead will start working together over the summer once you know what your client is to start planning things out. It is not at all the case that you have to know how to plan a project. So when you start planning things out over the summer, you're going to be meeting really heavily with Jackson and Vicky, who are going to take you through like what different things you need to plan, how you need to plan them, what you need to consider, and basically kind of walk you through the whole process of like what it means to plan a project. What is a project timeline? What goes on a project timeline? What are the different components of the app going to be? How do you need to plan the architecture? None of these are questions that you're going to need to be able to come up with the answers to on your own. We have seasoned and experienced PMs who have signed up for the role of leading you all through these questions. And then by the time you get to the start of the year, you're going to have a really good picture of what the whole arc of your project over the year is going to look like. At which point you're going to do selection, where you pick all of the developers and designer for your team. And then at that point, it's like October and you're off to go. Your project goes, but you still have, you know, the full support of work from that point on. That was a great question, Sonia.
I think one other thing is that you're going to make this project spec that's going to sort of encompass how you imagine things are going to go, and that's going to change. And it's going to, things are going to get messed up, maybe things get pushed back, maybe things get pushed ahead, and you sort of just learn to go along with that and deal with the changes. And I think that's one of the biggest parts about sort of being a project manager is sort of just keep paying attention to it and sort of dealing with the changes that are going to arise.
Yeah, I was wondering, how you would go through the process of choosing a tech lead or even becoming a tech lead, and I was just what that process was, which is cool. And then also how do we choose like tech stack or like work with the client? Is that something we decide with them on what technical stack we use to pull their website or whatever it is they want, or is that more of a tech lead?
Those are great questions. Okay, so in terms of selecting a tech lead, we're going to have tech lead applications at a point a little bit later, like before the summer probably, but not immediately. It's going to be after we know where PMs are, or at least after you guys qualify to be PMs if you're interested in that. But there will be applications to be a tech lead on a team that are subsequent to these. So that's that side of it. In terms of choosing a tech stack, it's usually not that much of a conversation with your client because your client in almost all cases won't care. Your client's not going to say, you know, I really wish you had used React for this app, but you used Vue, and like we're really disappointed with the result. Mostly they're going to be concerned with the app at like a more high level functionality level. So The process will probably be a few conversations with your client where they communicate to you their requirements for the behavior of the app, not the implementation of the app, but just like what does it need to do, what problems does it need to solve. And then once you have at least a dim picture of that from talking with your client on a few occasions, you're going to have an opportunity to work with your tech lead, work with Tyler, who's going to be our head of engineering next year, work with anybody on board as a whole. I was the head of engineering last year, and I had a really big role in most teams in setting up the initial framework of the project and also talking to teams and project managers about how they could make choices about what technologies to use, what technologies I would recommend to solve their specific problems, what kinds of approaches they can take. And there's a big spectrum. I think Adam chose basically the whole tech stack for his project with Malay or himself, which was great, and the project's been a huge success. I think I helped Vicky to like a small degree.
I don't know anything about the stacks.
With
So
my insurance team, I talked through a few ideas for kind of technologies they could use, recommended like a database, recommended a front-end framework, recommended a back-end framework, etc. And they kind of got off and running with that. And on Jackson's team, I did like the front-end setup. I think myself, I went and like made their GitHub repository and like added all the things that they needed to like start working. So there's a spectrum in terms of how comfortable you and your tech lead end up being with scoping out a project architecture yourself. But I think PM tech lead pairs that feel prepared and comfortable coming up with a project architecture and putting everything together at the start themselves are like kind of at one extreme. And I think the average PM tech lead pair probably will work pretty closely with board to set up the initial components of their project. It's ultimately up to you, but you can fall anywhere on that spectrum, and you can either have someone on board help you get your project set up and kind of the architecture with you really closely, or you can do it all yourself. It's kind of just whatever your team feels comfortable doing.
In terms of picking the stack, it's, as Luke said, pretty much just up to you and your tech lead. But there is kind of an informal rule of try to pick technologies that will be marketable and useful for the developers. And you'll notice that a lot of the teams end up falling into having roughly the same technologies. Some end up having a few different things, but generally most projects are React front end and some type of Python back end or like Django. So you have a lot of flexibility in what you want to do, but generally most people pick to go that route, and it also just happens to be the route that when the client managers pick projects, the projects fit into those technologies pretty well as well.
Yeah, that's a great point, Jackson. And that's just the reason for that is just because half of the goal of JumboCode is to prepare students for working on real projects in the world, give students new skills in web development or app development that they aren't able to get from tough coursework. So in service of that goal, if you and your tech lead say, like, we're going to use this really niche front-end framework that we found on GitHub that like nobody knows how to use or like nobody's used before, but it's going to like solve our project problems, great. We would probably as board say to you, great. We recognize that you feel that these tools would suit your project really well, but they also have probably pretty low value for your developers to learn, like moving on from this year in JumboCode. And we would encourage you to pick something that's like at least within like earshot of the mainstream. So yeah. We were gonna say something now.
Yeah, also, I think you're trying to think about when you're choosing this tech stack. You have to keep in mind that very likely most of your team members won't have any experience with most of the tech stack, if not all of it. So you're not trying to just put on as much as you can to sort of make the project in your mind go faster. It's one thing that I was struggling with a little bit in the beginning, to be honest, because I wanted to add like TypeScript and all these different things.
There are many teams that are successfully using TypeScript. TypeScript isn't forbidden.
Yeah.
I regret not using TypeScript, to be honest, but there were like other things I was considering using as well, and it just sort of comes down to like, it might help your project later go faster, but the sort of hump in the beginning might not be worth it to get people caught up with all these technologies.
Yeah, absolutely. Good question.
If you're planning on sitting and running the screen, can you still like be a PM, like be interested in the
So the answer is not a hard no. We do have a question on the PM application, which we're going to send out right after this and publish everywhere. It's already been published in some places. When you're filling out the PM application, there will be a slot that says like, are you planning on being abroad in the spring and or fall? I will not guarantee that we wouldn't rather choose someone who is in person both semesters, but there's also no guarantee that we won't choose someone who's going to be remote / abroad for one or more semesters. We currently have one team where we don't have any teams where the PM is abroad. We have one team where the tech lead is abroad, and they seem to be doing fine. They're doing great. It's not like a huge issue. So yeah, absolutely still apply if you're kind of going abroad in the spring. I'm emergency. Cool. Becca.
Do you give your PMs like any kind of training? Like, how do you know what to do?
It's a great question for you.
I'm a plant, let me have it.
So I think someone was doing a really good job of getting teams to work before the semester begins. So last summer before school starts, since August, we will like meet every. I think
Early August, really.
yeah, early August. We met.
Yeah.
Yeah, we will meet every week to talk about the process. Yeah, like how to communicate with clients, how to use GIM or Asana, which is project management site. So like how to use the tools, how to communicate with the clients, how sprint planning, how those things work together. So yeah, I feel like even if you didn't have those technical project management experience with the training during the onboarding phase, you'll be so like
That's what these lovely people will be doing in that
Yes.
summer. They will.
Yes. Jackson and Vicky, who you're looking at right now, will be the people who sit with you every week over the summer and teach you how to be a good project manager. And was it a lot of work? Did it take up your whole summer?
oh no, it was every
No,
week,
it was
just, like,
so
2 hours
chill.
a- yeah, it was
Yeah,
really fun.
Like total 2
Yeah.
hours a week probably, and you got to meet everyone early. And it was super cool, and you got to meet all these people that you think will be the coolest people you'll ever meet.
And it's on Zoom.
Yes. Cool. Ksenia.
Project, and also can I stack on team with all of my.
Those are both great questions. So the answers are yes and no in that order. So yes, you can, if you are going to be a senior, even if you're not an engineer, you can take capstone. For example, Jackson is not
You
an
actually
engineer.
don't need to be a senior even. You can
Yeah,
just.
Jackson is a junior and an arts and science student, and he's getting credit for 2 semesters of capstone.
Hey, what's a
using his JumboCode.
capstone?
Capstone is a 2-semester course that is designed for senior CS engineers to take as a course that they take in their final year where they work on a big project. I'm actually not a senior, so someone who is a senior or someone who's in capstone would probably be well suited to explain what capstone is.
It's pretty cool. No,
Cool.
That's not
yeah,
actually-
it's, you just, you work, so generally the structure is you work with like 3 other seniors. If you're being a PM for JumboCode, you can either work individually in it, or you could work with your tech lead if they're also gonna take the class. So like Tyler Calabrese is working with Zayed currently as the PM and tech lead. So the structure of it, it's pretty low intensity for what you have to turn in, I'd say. And it's pretty flexible with deadlines, but you pretty much just have to do a bunch of like check-ins with the professor and check-ins with the client. It's a nice way to make sure. It's really nice to do as a supplement to JumboCode because it's a really good way to make sure that you're staying on task with checking in with your client and also with doing making sure that you're actually progressing your project and staying on a good timeline. And so I think that taking capstone and doing JumboCode for it is great because we will give you a lot of structure and board will give you structure, but this is like an extra layer of structure that you can utilize.
How many credits do you have for capstone, Jackson?
3 a semester.
We get 3 credits a semester. So capstone is a requirement for senior CS engineers, and it's open to people who can register for the course both semesters who are not senior CS engineers. And you could get those credits really easily if you were already being a JumboCode PM, because basically being a JumboCode PM fills all of the requirements that you would have in this class. Yeah, is essentially the idea. So that was Ksenia's first question. Can I use my JumboCode project if I'm a PM as my capstone project? The answer is a resounding yes. Lots of people do this. It's been done many times before. Kenya's second question was, can I fill my team with all my friends and close
No
people?
nepotism.
No, there's no nepotism. So, well, it's a little nepotism. If you can, we let you choose your tech lead as someone who you know and know you're going to work well with. If you have someone who has the skills to be a tech lead, who you're close with and know you work well with, you can choose that person as your partner kind of on the team leadership end of your project. So you're allowed to choose tech leads knowing who they are. When you're choosing your developers, you'll be choosing them completely anonymously from reading their applications. And you will have no idea if you're reading your friend's application or you're reading someone else's application. Not to say that you can't have your friends in your team, because maybe you will, but it's not going to be on purpose. Cool. Do you still have a question, Skylar? No, awesome. Go for it.
You guys said like there's more like technical or like team oriented PMs, but like how is that like established? Like does the PM themselves pick like if they want to take that more of a role, or like is it decided by-
Totally up to the PM. And I'd say that you generally just have to get the tech lead that you get that you generally pick the tech lead. And so generally it will be, you're picking a tech lead that will complement your skills. So my tech lead is phenomenal and brilliant and the coolest person of all time. And he also is insanely good at front end and back end. And so I have the luxury of being able to not do all too much of the technical side, just because he's capable of handling both. And he's capable of really helping the developers and taking on that role. If you want to be a more technical PM, Adam can probably speak to that a little bit better than me, but you can totally just make that decision on the fly. And the nice thing about being a PM is you can kind of flip-flop back and forth. As long as you're delegating tasks and making sure things are going well, you can take on tickets if you want. You can kind of do whatever you would like if you want to supplement what the team is doing, but that's not an expectation.
So a lot of it just depends on communication and your communication with the tech lead.
Well, I'm honestly you have to choose in advance of declare. It's kind of just a function of what you end up doing. So as you're working in your team, if 1 week you say, I'm gonna assign myself a task, I'm gonna write this code for it, and I'm gonna commit it to the repository, great, you're a PM who committed something technical to your project. If you never do that once throughout the year, which we have plenty of PMs who don't actually write a line of code for their project or write, maybe 10 to 20 lines of code for their project throughout the year, that's not all uncommon for a PM. That's great. And if you're a PM who wants to assign yourself 6 tasks every week and work for a good few hours every week on the tasks that you assigned yourself, then now you're a PM who contributes technically heavily to your project. But it's just a matter of like how you balance everything week to week and what you end up contributing. It's not like a really formal thing.
What kinds of projects do people work on, both in terms of like the clients you work with and like the scope and scale and type of the like technical stuff of the project?
That's a great question. So we've worked with a really wide range of different clients in different areas before. All of our clients are supposed to have a mission that's grounded in social good and be, nonprofit-y. We don't do JumboCode projects that are like, we're going to help develop your stock trading app for your startup. And we're going to do it great. That's not what we are. That's not what we're about. Some of the projects that we've done before I have this list of, we wrote a list on the PM application of different kinds of projects that have happened before, which I will now read to you. JumboCode has developed exciting projects with a range of nonprofits working for important social causes, including food and housing insecurity, resources for individuals with experience in the commercial sex trade, access to educational opportunities, and addressing drug abuse. That's 4 examples. We have many projects that fall into each of those categories over the years. We've worked for food banks, we've worked for homeless shelters, we've worked for all kinds of things. So yeah, and then in terms of the actual form that the apps take, we've made basically just web apps and mobile apps. Most projects have either a complex web interface or a complex mobile interface in addition to some kind of backend that feeds off of. Daria, do you have a question? You raised your hand.
Yes, I do indeed. I'm so sorry I'm in VMods. just, okay, first of all, you guys are all fantastic. Adam is the absolute best PM, cannot recommend enough. But just what is you guys' favorite part about this? Like being a PM in general.
Skylar, come up here. Skylar, come up here.
Oh.
Nick left the meeting, but if Nick was here in person, Nick, come up here.
Skylar's your favorite part of being a PM?
Just Skylar, yes. Skylar is not only my favorite part, the only thing I feel like gotten out of it.
Michael was a close second.
Michael is a very
Tie.
close second, yeah. No, the team is just phenomenal.
The team's really sweet.
Yeah,
I'm gonna say it's personally this team.
yeah, I agree. I mean, of course, my team's the best. But it's just so incredible to have this group of individuals that you're with for a full year. And I think it's very different than a lot of other clubs and a lot of other classes where a lot of clubs you're assigned to a project for maybe a semester, and a lot of classes you're with the same people for a semester. But you don't get this opportunity to work with all the same people, go to bondings with the same people for a full year. And within the team, I think the developers get to get close with each other because they all get to work with different people along the semester. So not only do the developers get to form a lot of these cool relationships, people they probably wouldn't be able to otherwise, I get to observe and lovingly father and just join in and make those connections as well. And I think I truly can't underscore enough how fun this has been and how much of a privilege it has been to have such an amazing team of developers and the tech lead.
You have like favorite moments? What's your favorite out of the whole arc of being a PM? Like, from like first selecting your tech lead and planning your project through like now getting almost ready to ship your project to your client, what's been like your favorite specific moment that's happened in your journey as a PM?
So my favorite moments have probably been the bondings,
Awesome.
because of just getting to know the team and having that fun outside the context of work. In terms of actually doing the work, I think my favorite thing to do is when we meet up to work in our weekly meeting and we accomplish nothing, but we hang out and have fun. And so, yeah, again, for me, the most rewarding thing has been getting to know and have fun with all of these individuals. And so I think that's reflected in what I value the most. But it's also been nice, of course, to create a super cool project along the way and work with an incredible client and team. Yeah.
Awesome.
It's also people. I think my team is better slightly.
Oh!
Yeah, but yeah, it's definitely the people, and I think my favorite moment would probably be last semester before the JumboCode morning party. We had a
We had
pregame.
a full club party,
Yeah,
just to explain that.
yeah, and my team, we had a pregame at my tech lead's house, and we sat around and played games, and we discovered a lot of interesting things about different people, and that was a really fun experience.
Yeah, for context, our team really had fun because they showed up extremely late, but they bonded.
Yeah, for sure, the people for me as well. I feel like I'll say exactly what these two have said, that my team is better, that
Sorry, Vicky's like laugh. Sorry, keep going.
you're good. Honestly, not much more to add other than that. My team's great. It's awesome seeing the project come up. It's super rewarding, like having little pieces come together and sort of seeing parts come together, because you sort of as a PM see it from a more macro scale often than I think. I worked as a developer for 2 years on JumboCode before I was a PM, and it's definitely a different experience, sort of seeing the whole project come up versus working on sort of smaller things. But yeah, I don't know, super rewarding getting to sort of know all these people and see something come up. It's awesome.
Yeah.
Add to their answers.
Yes.
I was gonna do this.
I think I love Brett, how much you're talking about the team and the work that you do and the tech stack, all of that lovely stuff. One thing to remember is we're actually doing this for like. And it's really cool, like always, people don't have money to pay for software engineers to build that project, right? The people we're working with, it's not like Facebook, it's like small nonprofits. A lot of times elderly people who don't know what the heck React is or how, like, what WordPress is, you know? So it's also just like a beautiful thing that you learn. Wait, I want to speak even though no one asked me. For context, I was a PM last year, so my team last year, also wonderful, also better than all the other teams last year, in my opinion, second everything these wonderful people said. But I had like my one client I met with like every 2 weeks, every month or so, and that was like the only person I ever spoke to. And then at the very end, she was like, hey, can I introduce you to my coworkers? They also really want to see what you've been working on. And we were like, sure. And I also brought like the entire team onto a Zoom meeting, and like every single member of our team got to like present the things that they'd been working on, because like everyone, even people who like never coded again, had like something that they had ownership over. And there were way more, I thought she meant like 2 or 3 people. There were like 12 people on their side of the Zoom, and like every single person from the nonprofit I was working with, which is called RIA, which works with people, we were the one that Luke mentioned that provide resources for people with experience in the commercial sex trade, which I was also really excited about working on anyway. Like every person from their organization like looked at what we were doing and was like, holy shit, this is so cool. I never thought it would be like this. And it was emotional, it was wholesome, and it was really cool.
Really
Okay,
everyone cried.
that's my answer. Yeah, Xenia was on my team. Yes,
I was a dev on her team, and it was so beautiful, and all these like old ladies were so happy. So yeah, just wanted to, cue the emotional commercial music. Just wanted to add that side of it to the answer.
When were you guys all, like, when were you first chosen as a PM, and why do you think you were chosen?
Oh,
We know why they were chosen.
I was, we actually just got access to like all the old stuff from board. And so I did fully just read my interview notes.
We
Yeah. But I guess we were chosen spring last year, probably midway through.
I can give you a real
I mean,
timeline.
it's
I
on like
think
the same
it's,
timeline as this.
Yeah,
You were probably
yeah.
chosen in, like,
I
late
think
April.
the applications are gonna be open from now for about 2 weeks, maybe closing a week from Monday tentatively.
Yeah.
And from that point, we're gonna interview everybody who applied. Like if you sent in an application, I think everybody who sent in an application, at least 2 or 3 people from board are gonna sit down and interview you over Zoom or in person. And then from that point, once we've finished all the interviews about 2 weeks later, we're gonna decide for sure like who our set of PMs is, and then like notify you all at that point.
In terms of what we did. In terms of why I think I got picked to PM personally, I think I underscored a lot that I really just wanted to create a good team environment, and I've been fortunate enough to have done a lot of leadership things in the past as well. So before this, I TA/TF. I'm a team leader for 180 Consulting, which is a hub here. I ran a mini internship last summer as well. So I've done a few different leadership activities that I think put me in the bucket of like a better PM than tech lead. And so I felt that's why I wanted to go for it. And I think that's probably what resonated with them and why they ended up with me.
Yeah, I would second to what Jackson said. I think it's also because for me, I guess the thing that stood out to the board when I applied is probably also my leadership. I didn't really have that much technical experience in terms of like web development or anything like that. But I think I had a lot of leadership experience since high school and also during college before I was a PM. In my college group, and also like mostly my college group, but also in other like consulting clubs before. But yeah, so mostly leadership, I would say for me. And also I've worked with clients before because of the consulting experience that I had. So I think that also helps a lot. Just because as a PM, you're communicating with the clients a lot.
Yeah, for me, I think it's maybe different from both of you guys. I'm sure I had that sort of stereotypical leadership experience that you might imagine as sort of being head of a club. I had to interact with clients, but I sort of had leadership experience in other places. I had done a lot of teaching in the past. And I think that sort of helps in a strange way, as sort of a way of being a leader. So this is now my 3rd year in JumboCode. I started as a freshman and I sort of knew a bit about the club. I was super passionate about it. I think that was one reason. Yeah, I'm not totally sure. I think I had a pretty bad interview, but
I was just about to comment on that. I had a horrible interview. I am the most anxious, horrible interviewer of all time, as in like, I will show up and they'll be like, tell me about yourself, and I'll be like, why? And it'll take me like a little bit to process, like, oh, you actually want to know about who I am as a human being, and then formulate an answer. Don't but no, I'm a horrible interviewer. They stress me out beyond belief. I think they're the most evil things of all time, but necessary. So you don't need to like give the most killer interview of all time. And we're not looking for you to show up in like a suit and tie and perfectly present like, here is my beautiful resume. And
JumboCode interviews are not like high stakes or scary.
No, not at all.
Your JumboCode role is basically going to be like 2 other tough students, or maybe 3, like sit in a room or a Zoom room with you and like have a little conversation with you.
Yeah.
There's not like really things you need to prepare. What?
Also, I'm fairly sure I interviewed both of you and you were great. So,
I was gonna say, I don't think I interviewed Adam or Jackson. I definitely interviewed Vicky. Yeah, me and Jennifer interviewed you, but I don't think I was at either of your interviews. But if Senia was, I would be sure.
I'm so sorry. But yeah, no.
But yeah, the interviews are not scary or like hard. We're not gonna ask you things that you're like totally unprepared to answer. You're not gonna have to like balance an ABL tree, and we're not.
Please. I think, so here's my pitch. This is kind of pitching to the board and also the PM.
You're on the
We should-
board. What do you mean?
We should replace the PM interview with just a leak code hard problem, and you have 3 minutes. If you can solve it, then you get the job.
We will not be implementing Jason's suggestions this year. So we'll keep in mind for the future.
Wait, can I say a thing that's actually
Yeah.
on topic? Like, sorry. As someone who like interviewed at least some of these wonderful people along with the other PMs, like if you haven't noticed already, they're 3 equally wonderful people, but like with very different vibes and skill sets and backgrounds. Like Vicky, to use you as an example, did like heavily talk about her a cappella group, which like out
It
of
was great.
context,
I was there.
like out of context, super random, but also like we play to your strengths, you know, like you don't need to have like 17 years in JumboCode or 8 million jobs to like qualify you to be a PM. It's like about using your experience and your skills to like make that work for you.
Yes, absolutely. You will have the chance to talk about your strengths, what you think makes you suited for the role. I would say have an idea of what you think makes you suited for the role. Have something that you can talk about that like communicates to us, make us believe that you'll be a good and capable project manager. We'll probably lean more on the like, do we feel that this person would be an effective leader of a team side than the like, do we feel that this person's like an awesome like technical person side. I think we would definitely lean towards people with strong, but you don't have to have like a ton of leadership experience. Like Vicky talked about leadership in her acapella group. It was super compelling. We could tell that she cared about leadership and cared about like being at the head of a team and ensuring that the people who were the members of her group would be successful. And that was great. And that really came across in her interview, but you don't have to have a lot of leadership experience. We just want to like, we want to hear about what you feel are your strengths and how you feel that you would lead a team to success. Good question.
I was trying to snap.
Yeah.
But I can't snap.
Let's do that. Anyone else? Any questions about anything?
You also are welcome to reach out to any of us at any point
Yes.
in time for literally any reason. And well, related to this week. But yeah, I don't think we put our emails up there,
We
but
can all, let's all send our email. Now everybody's in the JumboCode Slack.
we can.
There's a
type them.
whiteboard
Can
right
we
there.
type-
There's a-
oh, yeah.
Blackboard, that's a blackboard, not a
Okay,
whiteboard.
so I am.
Jackson, what? Why is it so big?
It's gonna fit, I promise.
No, it's not. What are we doing?
Well, not the whole.
That's a great idea.
My name is
I'm gonna type this on the
Wait,
screen where you can see
Jackson,
it.
can I send you, can I send you 1, 2, 3 greetings?
Oh my God, please, if
Okay,
you send me
okay,
a
okay.
card. If you send me a 1, 2, 3 greetings card, I will respond to your email within the minute,
Okay.
and it will most likely be a massive. That's all type.
Yeah. Are you done about parcel? Is it study to you?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, let's not laugh at my.
Adam?
I thought it was the coolest name of all. Just Adam. No introduction needed.
Vicky, what's
I'll
yours?
type
Yeah, you do
it.
it.
Yeah, or like, if you don't know how to type that, you can just. Oh, but you still have to type.
I feel like people can deal. It's not hard to
Awesome.
type.
You're also, if emails are intimidating to you, you can DM the JumboCode Instagram. You can DM my Instagram. I'll talk to you. You can DM any of us on Slack if you're in the JumboCode Slack. You can send me a Twitter DM. You can send me a message by carrier pigeon and I'll send it right back. Anything you want. Yeah.
Tell them their address.
Yeah, you can come to my house. It's 155 College Ave. You can ring the bell for unit 2. You can ring the bell for unit 2 and say, I want to discuss being a JumboCode PM, and I'll say, great, come on up.
You can hunt around comics until you find one of us.
Is this your Instagram, Justin?
That's my Instagram. Please do not find my Twitter.
Okay. So
Or find my
if you think you might want to talk to any of us, take a picture of this slide, I guess. I don't know where, I'll post a link to these slides in the JumboCode Slack. I don't know where else we posted the announcement, so I don't know where else to post this. But if you want to reach out to any of us, or even might want to reach out to any of us, take a picture of this slide and then you'll be able to do so.
Okay, we're not gonna perform it now because it's something that you only get to know as a PM. But all the PMs do in fact have a coordinated song and dance that you want to do. So.
How often do you sing and dance?
One. We haven't done it yet because it's at the end of the year. But
All right, you get us to do it bonding, or is this a different thing? I don't know if I call that coordinated or official.
Okay. I would call it, I wanted you guys to do something and you all said no. And you guys should all do it next time.
Bye, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.
You're also welcome to stick around if you have like individual questions.